Hey everyone, welcome back to my channel, Explore with Joseph. I hope you guys are having a terrific day. Hey, and it's time for another book review. Today I have Nicholas Ostler's Empires of the Word, A Language History of the World. First off, I would like to state that this book is quite old, but can still be bought on Amazon, link in description. And of course, yeah, it's from 2005. So it is as old as I am, which is sort of crazy. But nonetheless, I think it still has its value to today. I would start off, as I do my other book reviews, with a description of the book. It gives the first history of the world's great tongues, gloriously celebrating the wonder of words that binds communities together and makes possible both the living of a common history and the telling of it. From the uncanny resilience of Chinese through 20th centuries of invasions to the enraging self-regard of Greek and to the struggles that gave birth to the languages of modern Europe. These epic achievements and more are brilliantly explored, as are the fascinating failures of once universal languages. A splendid, authoritative, and remarkable work. It demonstrates how the language history of the world eloquently reveals the real character of our planet's diverse peoples and prepares us for a linguistic future full of surprises. And this book, so that already it's basically summing up main philology of the world. And for those who don't know, philology is basically historical linguistics and how languages evolve throughout history and how they're sort of interconnected with one another, which is a field of study that I'm very passionate about and very interested in. That's why I got this book. And Nicholas Ostler, the author, is has a PhD from MIT and also has degrees from Oxford. And he now lives in Bath in England. So, very British perspective, I will say. And he doesn't admit to his sort of Eurocentric British perspectives in the book. It starts off with more exploring the nature of language history, which just talks about language history in general. This chapter can be a bit mundane to those who aren't fascinated by linguistics or historical linguistics or philology in general. However, it was quite interesting for me because I like that stuff. And then part 2 of the book, it really gets in the nitty-gritty stuff of languages, and it talks about how languages in the Middle East, particularly like Aramaic, Akkadian, Sumerian, and Egyptian, Coptic, Arabic, Phoenician, all those types of things. And it does go quite in depth into those things and like the reasons why they were successful and reasons why they weren't and reasons why they're not in use anymore, and why some of them are still in use, like Arabic. That's such a dominant language in our world. And it talks about religion, Turkic, Persian, and all of that. But I would like to point out, though, he doesn't talk about Armenian a whole lot, and I'm very disappointed in that book. He should be talking about Armenian. Armenian's a very, very ancient language. It's very important in my opinion, and not only for religious reasons, but also preserving ancient texts from the classical periods of our world. And I think it's an important language, and he misses out on the development of that, which honestly really saddens me and makes this book sort of less enjoyable for me. But that is definitely my Armenian-centric point of view, and I admit to that 100%. Then he also compares Egyptian to Chinese, which is very interesting, in how they're similar writing systems at first and how they still are. So they're some of the oldest languages and they still exist today. Like Chinese, there's Mandarin dialects, Cantonese, etc. And Egyptian is still preserved due to Coptic liturgy and is used in Coptic used by the Coptic Church. However, it's not really spoken anymore, which I'm also sad. I wish Coptic was a common language, but again, that's my Egyptian perspective on things. But nonetheless, he does really dive deep into that. He also talks about Sanskrit, which was a very interesting chapter in the development of Sanskrit, and how it sort of developed differently to like some maybe more of these Middle Eastern ones where they were more or conquered and stuff. This one was more spiritually guided. I mean, the Middle Eastern ones were also spiritually guided. Obviously, Arabic, language of Islam, Hebrew, Judaism, Aramaic, Christianity, and all of that. But it's very interesting. Yeah, and he talks about a lot of religion and politics throughout this book, which is very good. I mean, can't really talk about language without those things. Talks about the development of Greek, which is very interesting. It said in here that ancient Greek was a tonal language, which I didn't know, and I found very fascinating as someone, and that's why modern Greek today, as someone who does speak modern Greek, has all those like accents on the words. It's to denote the tone that used to be present, and now it's just an emphasis. So that's really fascinating to me. He also talks about the European languages, which is interesting. However, there was a map that was very controversial. I posted it on my nerdy Facebook language group. Yes, I know, I am like an old person at heart. I mean, why else would I be doing book reviews? But on a different note, it was very controversial. I got so many reactions. It was like the most popular thing. It had like 2,000 plus likes and whatever, and then so many comments. I reached the limit of comments on Facebook, which I don't know, I'm sort of happy about. But there's a lot of negative things saying that is historically inaccurate for today. And I mean, I guess it is like a 20-year-old book, which, I mean, there's a lot of innovation has happened in the past 20 years. So that was that's cool. So it definitely needs to be updated. This book definitely needs to be updated, whatever the case is, but still, I think relevant to today because some of the information is still relevant to today's world, and some of the history hasn't fully changed from what our knowledge was 20 years ago to today. So it's still relevant. It also talks about Latin and the development of the Romance languages, and how the Romance languages, particularly Spanish and Portuguese, how they spread throughout the Americas, and the effects on the native language such as Quechua and Guarani and all of that, and how some of those native languages are still present today, depending on how the conquests of the Spaniards and the missionaries were all it talks a lot about the missionaries and the missionaries' perspective, which is quite interesting. Yeah, especially in today's world, I think it's interesting to know these different perspectives and how people came across. And it also talks about the Dutch. And the Dutch were very interesting in their colonization, I feel. They didn't really want to enforce their culture on others, which is obviously a good thing in my opinion, but it's interesting. But they also weren't as a strong colonial power compared to some. So, quite interesting. It talks about La Francophonie and the spread of French, and the spread of Russian throughout the Soviet Union and the Russian Empire, which is very interesting. And it also talks about English and how English is a world language and why it's a world language. And there's so many different factors that add to make English such a world language that it's quite fascinating. And you really get a perspective on, let's say, why English is more of a world language than, let's say, Mandarin Chinese, even though in my perspective, Mandarin Chinese is becoming maybe the next world language, if not Arabic, which he also points out in here, which is very interesting. And he also looks ahead and sees like trends that are happening around the world and what will happen to dominant languages around the world. How will languages be affected by future changes in the environment, which is quite fascinating. And I like his perspective on that. On another note, one of my favorite quotes in here is this paragraph on page 520 to 521, where it says, in the early 21st century, the aspiration to learn English or Arabic has become distinctive for many young people all over the world. In the countries of Western Asia and North Africa, Arabic language teaching has become a service industry seeking foreign customers, just like ELT and so many other parts of the world. English and Arabic are in some ways remarkably similar. Both have a written history, of about 1,500 years, which is interesting. On a side note, that's very interesting that English and Arabic have been around for around the same period of time. Okay, back to the quote. Have been spread around the world by speakers who often knew no other language and have bodies of literature that freight them with association many centuries old. But rare is the young person who tries to learn Arabic for Avicenna's philosophy, be it the stories of the 1001 Nights or the novels on Naguib Mahfouz. Even rarer is one who struggles with English, hoping to read the King James Bible or the Book of Common Prayer. In our age, Arabic is for foreign learners in the language of the Quran, English the language of modern business and global popular culture. So it's interesting how Arabic has more of a cultural, religious significance to learn, and English is more with the corporate side of the world, the capitalistic side of the world, which I find very fascinating and I do agree with. However, I think Arabic is also good for business these days, but that's my perspective. So I hope you guys enjoyed this review. You can find the link if you want to purchase this book in the description, and I highly recommend you give this a check out. I mean, it's not necessarily my favorite book, but it's still worth a read, and to anyone interested in linguistics, it is good to know. But yeah, if you're not, I wouldn't bother too much reading this book because it is a very heavy read. But yeah, your decision. I hope so. If you like this, please subscribe, like my channel, and also follow me on my other social medias, which can be found in my About section on my YouTube channel. And I hope you have a lovely rest of the day. Thank you very much.